everyone, welcome to the interview on France 24. My guest is Justice Stephen Breyer. He's a judge at the Supreme Court of America. Hello, and thank you so much for being with us at Le Hall de la Villette, which is the Peace Forum here. You were nominated at the Supreme Court 25 years ago by Bill Clinton. You have a job for life. How is it to have a job for life in a world that changes so quickly?
Well, the world's changing doesn't matter very much. It does matter, but you have a perspective usually on most things that, because you've seen a lot and you think a bit into the future in the cases. So, for example, if we have a case involving the president, we have to know that what we are going to do will affect future presidents. And so be careful. We decide according to principles, and the principles apply to more than one person. And a job for life, it needn't be a job for life. It could be a job for a number of years, a
25 years or 30 years.
Fine. But it's in the Constitution, so it's unlikely to change.
When do you start thinking, I'm going to make an end to it? I'm going to quit?
When I feel that I'm not doing my job well. And of course, I have to watch and ask others. I got that question once from a person who said, well, how will you know?
Right.
I said, my colleagues will tell me. And,
you sure?
Yeah, I said, but you want to know what happens if we all go gaga at the same time. I don't know.
But it's a hard decision to make, probably.
I think probably you will find out.
Brett
in your own life.
We'll see.
Mm-hmm.
Brett Kavanaugh was appointed to the Supreme Court. So does it mean that the majority of the 9 judges is now conservative?
Conservative, liberal are terms really used by the press. We don't think of ourselves.
You don't consider yourself liberal, as we say in the
No, I
press.
don't. Sometimes I am, sometimes not. In a political sense, those are political words. In the court and in the law, I think now, at this stage, a judge will be viewed as conservative if he places greater emphasis on the language of a text in the law or the Constitution, or the history, what it was like in 1789, and I probably put more weight on the consequences, the purposes of the law. That's probably the difference.
You would disagree with Brett Kavanaugh maybe on lots of social issues.
Well, if we were voting as citizens, perhaps. But as judges, we'll see. Because
what do you expect when you say we'll see?
We'll see. And if you were in my position and you had gone to the conference last week and the week before, you would say, we'll see. He probably doesn't know himself how he will decide. Most issues, you don't go with a preconception. People are affected by their upbringing, by their experience, by their, what I would call their philosophy du fond, their philosophy, their basic philosophy. And in some cases that has an effect with words like liberty that don't explain themselves.
But could rights such as abortion, for example, be more restricted?
Well, we don't know, do we? But we do know that the decision on abortion, the basic decision, has been the law for how many? Almost 50 years, 40 years. And law changes very, very slowly. And it's a basic principle of law. People have to build their lives on what the law is. So all judges and lawyers are conservative in the sense that they don't want to change things too quickly.
9 judges with different philosophical views about the law. Do you argue sometimes? How does the...
Well, as I say, we're about half unanimous, but after the oral argument and after we read the briefs, we're in conference and we go around the table in order. No one speaks twice till everyone's spoken once, and we discuss briefly. We say what our point of view is, then we have back and forth discussion. I have never heard in that conference room in 25 years a voice raised in anger. I have never heard.
But doesn't it mean there are no disagreements?
Of course not. If I'm angry, and no one says anything mean about the other person, not even as a joke. So, if I feel very upset, I go home and I tell Joanna, my wife. And
On
she said,
immigration, for example, you might be completely on a different views with the
I
other
wrote
judges.
an opinion on immigration, which is a fairly long opinion, and which says that those who are stopped at the border should not be kept in prison without any possibility of bail or release within 6 months. I gave my reasons. It was a long opinion, and it did not command a majority, though it's open somewhat for the future. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Is it frustrating not to be in the majority?
I'd prefer to be in the majority, but not frustrating. If you are sometimes in a dissent, you can write exactly what you want, and you can hope that someone will read it, and you can hope it may have an influence in the future, and you can hope, most of all, that it has an influence when you first write it, in the present, on what is written in the majority, because no one likes to look like an idiot. And so if you have a good argument, they'll change the argument. My dissents, the way I write my dissents, not the only way, but I write them without much emotion. I write them dup, da-dup, 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 very clear, I hope, and very logical, I hope. And I hope by that means one would think a child of 2 would agree with me.
The actual Attorney General Matthew Whitaker once said that the courts are supposed to be the inferior branch. He also criticized the Supreme Court's power to review legislative and executive acts, and he declared them unconstitutional. What do you think? Are you an inferior branch?
That's something I don't think about, whether I am inferior, superior, or some other kind of irier. I don't think that. That's not the job, and it's beside the point. And anyone in the United States has freedom of expression. They can say what they want. So people can say what they want.
Why did he say inferior branch, you think?
That's his problem. Ask him. I don't know. But my job is to take the cases and decide them as best I can. And I think every member of the court feels the same way, and that's what we will continue to do.
America is very divided nowadays. Also, the political parties are very polarized. What's your take on this?
Well, as a person, I'm sorry. As a person, I would like more unity. As a person, I say to the college audiences, look, the elected people tend to say what their constituents want them to say. So you think it's too divided. So do I. The first place to look, my friends, is right in the mirror. What are you doing to prevent the division? And if you don't think it's good, participate in public life. You have the right to participate in public life. That's what Pericles said in his oration, the great oration about Athens. He said, what do we say of a man who does not participate in public life? We say not that he minds his own business. We say he has no business here in Athens.
But why is it so divided right now?
Oh, you're asking a question that every political scholar and every writer and every columnist writes about. And I have no particular insight on that. But newspapers, journalists, and even internet, they perhaps do the things they think their audience want them to do. So you begin with the ordinary citizen and you say, it's partly your job to participate. Do it.
Do you think democracy is threatened in America?
I doubt it. I mean, I certainly hope not. I doubt it. Democracy threatened?
People talk about civil war.
Oh, please. Civil war was something, it involved slavery. Slavery. And that can think of that. We can't even think of it now. And think of the period of segregation. Think of Vietnam. Think of Vietnam. I was alive in Vietnam, you know. So I had not only seen the efforts to overcome segregation, real segregation in the United States, but I lived through that period of Vietnam where the country was very divided, where there were riots. There were race riots in Watts. There were riots in Washington, D.C. Now that was, people were dying, thousands of people.
So it's not worse today?
It's certainly not. Certainly not. Nowhere near, in my opinion.
Talking about politics, so something's happening in Florida right now. They're recounting the votes. Could Could you have actually to statute on this, like you did for
we have
the
to
presidential
consider
in
that?
2000?
I don't know. It would depend on what issue. It would depend on whether there was a federal legal issue. So it's possible, but I don't know.
There are mass shootings in the United States, and I really wanted to ask you this question because the latest happened last week in Thousand Oaks in California. How does the Second Amendment protect people who actually sell or own guns? Because they always talk about the Second Amendment of the Constitution.
It says, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Now, 4 people on the court thought this was about state militias and thought it meant that Congress could not call up the state militias and disband them. 5 members of the court thought it gives an individual right to keep and bear arms. All right, that was the decision. Now, many states have the same kind of thing in their constitution. But according to a friend of mine who studies this, Adam Winkler, he said not one, and they have regulations, not one single regulation has ever been struck down by a state court under the state constitution. So the answer to your question, it's a little long, I try to explain why, is we don't know yet. And even in the majority opinion, it said, of course, there can be many kinds of regulation.
There can be many kinds of regulation.
Yes, for example, what you call assault weapons or those things that shoot automatically, automatic weapons, or nobody's going to be allowed to keep an atomic bomb. What will they be allowed to keep? What won't they be allowed to keep? Well, that is a question that remains for the future. And if the states are an example, there won't be many regulations held unconstitutional. Short answer to your question is it's not yet decided.
Thank you so much, Justice Breyer.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for watching. Stay with us on France 24.